I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Coaster Wars podcast. Hopefully, this is the second week in a row that we are back. I say hopefully because you never know what's going to happen, but...
Oh my gosh.
Yes, we are diving back into the Coaster Wars original layout of our podcast. We're both bringing two racing coasters today. Two... I don't want to say like the best, but like two legends in the racing coaster department.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, this is going to be a good episode. I can already tell. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, diving into the archives a little bit too. I mean, we're bringing some aged coasters to this episode. That's just for sure.
Mine was built in 78. When was yours built?
Probably around 72. Yes. So
dang,
yes.
Jeez.
These coasters are old enough to be my dad.
Your dad, my dad too. Our dad.
Okay. Do I gotta introduce him too? Oh, great. This is gonna be bad. I'm gonna mess this up.
You gotta do it. It's part of the podcast. You said you would do it.
Why do I do these things?
It was your idea too when we started this podcast.
Okay, shut up. Oh, all right, let me do this. In the red corner, standing at a height of 88 feet and reaching a top speed of 53 miles per hour, hailing from the PTC gym and state of Ohio, it's the Racer. In the blue corner, standing at a height of 125 feet and reaching a top speed of 60 miles per hour, hailing from the Aerodynamics Gym and also Ohio, it is Gemini. Let the fight begin. So, yeah, we're great at this, aren't we? My coaster's the Racer.
Mine is Gemini.
This will be fun to listen to.
Oh, it's going to be I'm going to have fun editing. I can tell already. All right. Anyways, you go into yours
Let's talk about the
first.
Racer. Yeah, let's talk about the Racer. I like this coaster. This is one of the best racing coasters in my opinion. There's only a couple that rank above it. One of them's probably American Eagle, but we're not going to say that. Anyway, the Racer, we got to ride that 2021. Does that sound right? We went and rode it?
I don't
2021, 22. I don't remember either. Anyway, but it is at Kings Island. It is an original coaster to Kings Island. It was constructed for the opening in 1972. It's a really good coaster. It's got a lot of great airtime. It's got a lot of character to it, too. And it's just an overall really fun ride experience. We only got to ride one side of it. I will say that. But it is just a really fun coaster from start to finish. It has a couple pacing issues, but you'd expect that from a coaster in 72. But it is a lot of fun. I don't know how you felt about it, but I really enjoyed this roller coaster.
No, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like you said, it has a lot of really good airtime moments from what I remember. And when we rode it, they weren't running both sides, right? They were only running one side?
No, they were running both sides still. When we rode it,
okay.
We just kind of rode it a couple times on the same side and then left because we had other coasters to ride at that park.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a really good thing to say when a coaster is still running both sides because that's one of the issues with American Eagle is we love that ride, but they don't run both sides anymore, which really stinks because half the character when it comes to a racing coaster is the fact that it's a racing coaster. Is you've got another train to interact with and stuff, which makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with the Racer is it does fall in this lineup quite a bit. I mean, you're talking at Kings Island. You have two of the best wooden roller coasters in the world, the Beast and Mystic Timbers. And then this one is just kind of there. But to that point, it is still a great ride experience in this park. I would never call this a bad coaster, but it definitely has, some quirks to it, especially the turnaround at the very end of the coaster where you go like 4 miles an hour through the turnaround and you're just like, Okay, come on, let's go. But other than that, it is a really fun ride experience. I love the racing aspect. It is a very well done racing element to this coaster. It is an out and back layout, so the entire way out, you are directly next to the other train. And for that, it does make it an exciting experience because you truly do want to win the race at the end. And you can see when you roll into the final breaks who truly won, and then you can talk a little, especially if you got some buddies over on the other train, you can be like, haha, we won. So that's always a fun thing.
Oh yeah, very much so. And I would like to say too, like, if you just look at the coaster, like it's got all white supports and stuff, so it's really nice to look at and everything like that. And
why are all racing coasters with white and blue? Is that just a thing? Like,
it must literally just be a thing because American Eagle is the same way. Lightning Racer, actually, I don't think has white supports, but I would have to look at it. But I think of what is the RMC one where I'm pretty sure it has white supports and then one side is green track and one side is blue track.
Oh, that's Twisted Colossus out in California.
Yeah. That's a racing coaster. It's also got white supports. So.
Yeah, I don't know. It must just be a thing. Gemini is red and blue, but it doesn't just have the white. Oh, you said that already, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The racer at King's Dominion, that is also called the racer. That one also is red, white, and blue.
Oh, that is just
it's just a thing, I guess.
It must just be a thing. That's funny. Why don't you get into the layout of this racing coaster?
You want to know another one that was red, white, and blue?
What?
Dueling Dragons, and that was red and blue and white.
It totally was.
It's just that's
what the heck is up with that? It's a secret unspoken rule of the roller coaster engineer world. Apparently, is that it has to be red, white, and blue.
Okay. Yes. So the racer layout wise, give me 1 second here.
Come on, Gabe.
I was not prepared today.
Obviously. We apologize for our technical difficulties and we'll be back with you momentarily.
All right, the layout.
Okay.
I got it. I'm just wasting time at this point. Okay, so you drop off the lift hill. The other cool thing about this coaster, I will say, it is positioned right next to the newest ride in the park, Orion, and it makes a very, very gorgeous skyline. It is a very pretty little area of the park. Anyway, so you drop off the lift hill, which is 85 feet tall, and you drop into the first of multiple back-to-back airtime hills. The first one is probably more of a speed hill. I'd call the second one a speed hill, but the third one is a full airtime hill. It goes all the way up. And then you drop down into another speed hill before entering the turnaround. So if you are on the blue track, I believe it is a left turn. If you are on the red track, it is a right turn. And you do a full 180-degree turn back towards the station. And before dropping into another full-size airtime hill, which leads into another slight turn back to align with the initial section of track. You get 2 more speed airtime hills, followed by more of a traditional full airtime hill into the final breaks. It's a very simple out and back layout that you would find on a lot of roller coasters. The biggest difference is you're racing next to the coaster next to you.
Yeah, so with the racer, are there any really good specific moments where the trains interact?
Yeah, so the first 3 airtime hills, so the first 2 speed hills and the final massive hill before turning to go into the turnaround are all right next to each other. So you go through those 3 elements where you're basically right next to the other train. I mean, you could almost reach out and touch the other train. That's how close you are. After that, the coming back trip, you are on the outside of the 2 tracks that head out. So as you're coming back, you are just next to the other track. You don't get next to the train. So really the main interaction points are the very first 3 elements. However, if you look to the other side, you can see the train enter the final breaks as you enter the final breaks. So you can still see who won. And that's the biggest thing. You want to know who won the race. So you can, it's not like a dueling coaster. I will say that the racing aspect is only cool for like the first half and the very end, but it is a classic racing coaster, and that's what it is. It's an out and back layout, and you race out and you race back.
Yeah, me and Gabe talk about it a lot with these older Woodies, especially these older Woodies. It's just how much character they have. And this kind of coaster reminds me a lot. Me and Gabe talk about Blue Streak, I think is at Cedar Point. And it's not a big coaster. It doesn't do anything too crazy, but it's got some good airtime on it. And it's just so much fun to ride.
I would say it has more airtime than the Beast. I would definitely say that the Beast is not necessarily an airtime machine. It's for what it is when it was built. It has a couple of really good airtime hills, and it still has a couple of like moments where you're like, okay, this is boring. But that's what you expect from a wooden roller coaster built in the 70s. Like, let's be honest here.
Yes.
Like, comparing it to the other ones from its time, I think it is definitely a great ride experience. It's a piece of history is really what it is. It opened with the park, which is a huge thing. Like, it's been around forever it's kind of the same. You know how me and you love the American Eagle because we went to Six Flags Great America. It's the same thing for people who go to Kings Island and live in Ohio. It is their kind of like personal favorite. They rode it when they were a kid. They have so many memories of it. And that's how the American Eagle's for us. It's just, obviously we don't live in Ohio, so we just don't have the same kind of praise for it. But it is a really fun ride experience, and it definitely has a lot of personality and character in it, I think.
Well, and we mentioned this a lot too, is you really have to sometimes analyze a coaster in the time that it's built. And like you said, for the 70s, this is actually a really great coaster. And how tall did you say it was?
It's only about 85 feet, I believe, is the first drop. So it's not huge. I mean, you're not talking a stat monster by any means, but it isn't tiny either. It's not only 50 feet tall or something like that. So
it's a decent coaster, so it's really great.
It's definitely a coaster people remember riding, I think, especially if it's, this could be your first roller coaster, or your first like big roller coaster that you've ever ridden. And I think, kind of like the same way the American Eagle is, where it's kind of a step up. It's not the top, it's not Orion or Diamondback or the Mystic Timbers, but it's not a kiddie coaster either. And it's a good stepping off point for, like I said, people growing up in Ohio region that, this might have been the first amusement park they've ever gone to, and the Racer is one of the first coasters they've ever ridden. I think for that reason, that's probably why it has stayed around for as long as it has.
Oh yeah, but with that, I think we got to switch gears here a little bit and let's get into my coaster, Gemini.
Yes. So the first thing I want to say right off the bat, the dueling aspect in Gemini is way, way, way better. Like, you can literally high five the other train as you're going through this layout.
I can either confirm or deny details, but we may or may not have experience with said high five.
Yes. High five on your own expense, but disclaimer, right?
Yes.
Sued here. But yeah, so Gemini is a little bit newer. It is interesting though, because it is a hybrid coaster. It is not a fully wooden roller coaster.
Oh yeah, and you know what? Yeah, RMC hybrids do a really good job of highlighting their track. They usually make it a nice bright color. I mean, I think of Gwazi that has purple track or Wildcat that has red track. So when I was watching the POV, I thought I had the wrong coaster because it did not, it was very well hidden that it's a hybrid coaster. But yes, this is a hybrid coaster. It was built by Arrow in 1978, and this is at Cedar Point in Ohio. So another older... Go ahead.
The best way to describe Gemini is, so the hybrid track that we were talking about, the hybrid construction, originally started with the Arrow mine trains back in the 60s. So they basically took the concept of a mine train and said, well, let's just make it over 100 feet, and then let's just make it a racing coaster while we're at it, and we'll see what happens. So it has a lot of the jankiness, or I don't want to say roughness. I'd call it janky. Very janky, very abrupt movements. very abrupt direction changes and of like the Aero mine train, but on a lot larger scale.
And since we're sort of getting into the history of the ride and such, just a couple fun facts here. Even though Gemini wasn't technically the tallest ride ever built, or at the time, it was still technically one of the largest, just in general, rides to ever be built. And the popularity of a ride like that started making coasters just be built bigger and bigger and bigger, especially being built at Cedar Point, which now having this coaster at Cedar Point kind of made Cedar Point develop into the roller coaster capital of the world that it is today.
Yeah, it definitely holds kind of a special. It's another one of those coasters, and it seems like a lot of these racer coasters kind of are. I think some of it is just the time period that they've been built, but they all, kind of have that whole, if you grew up going to Cedar Point, if you grew up in Ohio, where like this might have been again one of the first roller coasters you ever rode of this size or of this magnitude, and for that, a lot of people have again really good memories of it, and it's another coaster that has stood the test of time. I think the biggest difference between like the Gemini and Racer, or even towards American Eagle, is Gemini races through the entire layout. It is not an out and back layout. And so you have some turns where you'll be on the inside of the curve, and you'll have some turns where you're on the outside of the curve. And you actually race through the entire layout, through all of the turns, through all of the airtime hills, except for at the very end is when you finally split before heading into the final breaks. So you do get more of the racing, more of the quote unquote dueling aspect than some of the other racing coasters out there.
Oh yeah, so why don't we get into the stats and layout of this coaster? So this is 125 feet. Drop is 118 feet at 55 degrees. You've got a total speed of 60 miles per hour. And when we get into the layout,
that's low. That's got to be low. It doesn't. It feels faster. It doesn't.
No, it does. No. Gabe is so right about that. I was looking at the stats. Now, when me and Gabe do our research, we found that the most consistent, most accurate source for general roller coaster stats like this is a website called rollercoasterdatabase.com. So that is what I use.
RCDB.
Yeah, it's tried and true. I mean, even some coasters that have different stats, like maybe the park will claim that it's this high, but some other website claims it's this high. Roller Coaster Database will list both of those heights. And so those are the stats that I got for it, but it feels so much faster. I don't know how it does it, but
probably just because of the jankiness of that ride. But yeah, it does definitely feel faster. Probably. Maybe it's the trains. Maybe it's the fact that you're just in a lap bar.
Well, that's the other thing. Before I get into the layout, is that even though this is a hybrid coaster, it uses what look like very traditional wooden roller coaster trains, which is really crazy because this is technically a hybrid coaster. And so it should probably have a little bit more than just lap bar, like Gabe said.
Yeah, it definitely makes it more interesting, that's for sure.
Yes. So when we get into the layout, the best way that I can describe how this coaster was built is they basically just made the support system double wide so that they can make two tracks go side by side. Literally, like Gabe said, you are completely right next to each other at all times on this coaster, except for one section at the very end where the trains do separate. So I'm going to describe this like I am describing one train, but in reality, you have two trains side by side. So you start off with a slight right of the station, you get into a straight piece of track, another right brings you into that lift hill. And like I said, that is 118 feet. It plunges you down 55 degrees to that top speed of 60 miles per hour, which me and Gabe are not totally convinced of. Also, as a slight side note, and what I did not realize was a similarity between our two coasters, you also get a very great view of the park from up on this lift hill.
Yes, absolutely. That is very true.
This is Cedar Point, so you have Top Thrill right directly in front of you. You can see Millennium off in the distance, and then if you look really, really hard, you can also see the lift hill for Valraven too off in the distance.
Oh, fancy!
But
the one thing I will say is both these lift hills take 3 hours.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh.
The build up, the anticipation is definitely there.
The staple of an old wooden roller coaster, and apparently even a hybrid one, is if it does not take you longer than 3 minutes to get to the top of that hill, it's not worth it.
Yeah, click, click, click. Instead of click, 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 it's click, 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 click.
Yes, it is so slow. So after you drop down, you are then shot right back up into an elevated turnaround that is almost as tall as that initial drop. And you creep around this turnaround. It is very slow. And then you drop back off this turnaround into a very large airtime hill. You get some really great floater in the back row as you come back off this hill, where you're then thrust back up into another elevated turnaround. Thankfully, not quite as tall, so you go into it a little bit faster. And it also, I think, descends a little bit, so you gather speed as you come around this one, where you then drop off and go over another airtime hill, offering once again some floater airtime. You then go on a very long turnaround, but you get a bit of speed. And then you drop into 2 airtime hills. They're smaller and sharper, giving a little bit more ejector than floater. And then the finale, and this is where the trains separate. So you're both going straight, and then one goes to the left, one goes to the right. And this is a 360 ascending helix, where you then come into the final breaks. And now this moment, did something happen when we rode it, Gabe? Because I feel like we got stuck like before the breaks or something.
So what happened when me and you rode it the last time that we were at Cedar Point is the previous trains hadn't dispatched yet. So we actually experienced a full stop on the initial brake run. Okay. Where traditionally, I believe it only runs 2 trains, and they try to dispatch that first train and get it going up the lift hill as the second one's running through the brake run. So we actually had a full stop on the brake run, and it was a little more abrupt.
Yes.
It's probably what you are remembering. I will say this, in the POV that I watched, it did not seem as abrupt of a stop as what I experienced. So it might have just been running that way that day. But yeah, that end brake run can be a little abrupt and a little violent. That's definitely for sure.
At the same time, because of the way the helix tilts the train, before you come into the brake run, you're still kind of tilted. And this is the may or may not high five moment that me and Gabe are talking about. And especially because we got stopped so abruptly the way we did, I believe we were able to reach out and give high fives to people on the other train.
Well, on the first turnaround, you can reach over and high five people too, but don't do it. Don't do it though. You're not supposed to. Don't do it. Okay, but you can achieve a high fiveness there as the coaster is running.
Yes. So like I said, they basically just built a double wide support system. So these trains, when I say they are next to each other, they are really, really close. Like, holy bejesus. And like Gabe said, like, you could just reach over and touch that other train. We're not telling you not to.
No, don't do it. Don't do it, though. Don't do it. You can, just don't actually do it. You can do, like, air high fives if you want. I'll give you that. But no touching the other train. This sounds funny, doesn't it?
It does.
Don't do it.
So, this being a hybrid track is smoother than like a traditional wooden roller coaster, but at the same time, it is also an aero steel coaster.
It's not smooth. The smooth does not describe this coaster at all. It is very abrupt. I like that word for this coaster. It's a very abrupt coaster.
It's not wooden coaster janky. It's aero coaster janky.
Yes, absolutely. The one thing I will say about this ride is it does feel like it builds towards like a grand finale. Like you said, that first turnaround is very slow. The second one's a little bit faster. The third one's even a little bit faster. And then the helix is definitely more forceful. It's probably the most forceful moment on the ride, to be honest with you, is that end helix. but it kind of builds and builds and builds, and then you have that grand finale. So if that's something you like in a roller coaster, where maybe the first drop isn't the best, or isn't the best moment on the coaster, this is definitely for you. But yeah, the biggest thing is you're talking about aero here. So if you've ridden an aero coaster, you know even their full steel ones are not smooth by any means. I mean, let's be honest here. And some of that has to do with the construction and design aspects of the coaster. But a good comparison would be the mine train down at Great Adventure. If you remember the triangle airtime hill at the end of that. That's basically that is basically this entire coaster of Gemini, is that one moment. And it is definitely more violent. It's not smooth. Don't expect, RMC hybrid. This is Aero hybrid, old Aero hybrid. So, but for that aspect, I think it makes it a little bit more entertaining, in my opinion. It's definitely a very interesting ride experience from start to finish. That is for sure.
And just a couple fun facts at the end here. This would be the first and only racing coaster that Aero built, as far as I know. And when it was being built, when it was supposed to be done, it was slated to be the tallest, fastest, steepest, but due to construction delays, it was only the steepest, being beat out by the Loch Ness Monster, which is a coaster we've talked about, actually.
Another Aero design. That's funny. That Aero beat themselves. Yeah. That's kind of funny.
I know, right?
That sounds like something Aero would do, actually, now that I think about it.
I feel like Aero was definitely the intimate of its time.
Yeah. Well, they're Aero. We like Aero. Yeah. We love them for that,
We really do. That's going to have to be another Coasterers 101 episode, is we're just going to have to talk about Aero, because they are a company. Holy cow.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
Good and bad.
But with that, I believe we've sort of meandered to the end of our time here. So, Gabe, it is time for the title question. Who do you think won this fight?
That's a question? I thought I already kind of said that. It's definitely Gemini for me. I love Gemini. Gemini is a personal favorite of mine. The Racer is too, but not on the same level as Gemini and American Eagle, that is for sure. And I just love the high five, don't do it racing experience that you get on Gemini. It is just a blast. It's also at Cedar Point, so just kind of the location is a little bit nicer too, I think. At the end of the day, let's be honest here. Cedar Point is Kings Island's big brother, and this is a coaster you can definitely feel that on. It is a blast for Gemini, and that's my pick for this episode, for sure.
I'll let everyone in on a little secret. I think Gabe's a little mad that I was able to do Gemini and he couldn't. So
No, it's just, I like that coaster definitely a lot. It's definitely, like I said, a personal favorite. It's on my list. Like, I love that coaster. So
yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with Gabe here. Gemini takes it for me, and it really is. I mean, this is our racing coasters episode. And of course, the Racer is called the Racer, but the Gemini definitely has a little bit more of a racing aspect here. You race that train throughout practically the entirety of the ride. And I mean, even in that small little helix at the very end of the ride, you could still see the train the entire time, and you're pulled right back next to each other. So they're both a lot of fun, but when it comes to a racing coaster, I think Gemini takes the cake on this one.
Oh, absolutely. It's just so much more fun. It's just that quirky, awkward Aero-ness that I just love so much. So it envelops that character true and true, I think.
Yes. Well, on to our next episode, and I just looked at it, and I'm realizing
I have not looked.
Well, apparently we're going into the history books 2 weeks in a row. We're talking about our oldest coaster credits in our next episode.
So instead of the grandpas, we're bringing in the great-great-great-grandpas.
Oh, yeah. So we're talking about 2 very fun coasters. One that I'm really sad that Gabe hasn't ridden yet, because I had so much fun riding. But yours, too, is a favorite of both of ours.
2 underrated coasters, in my opinion. I definitely would like to say that.
I think I agree with you. So thank you for listening, everybody, and join us next week for mine and Gabe's oldest coaster credits.
Yes, and once I get to Silver Dollar City, we will be doing an entire episode on that park, and we'll be talking about all the coasters there. So make sure to continue listening to that episode as well.
Sounds good. See everybody next week.
Bye-bye.